Food security is not just a domestic issue, it is a critical factor in global power dynamics. The ability of a nation to feed its population shapes its stability, sovereignty, and geopolitical influence. When food supplies are abundant and affordable, societies remain stable, but when shortages or price spikes occur, governments can face unrest, migration crises, and even collapse. This vulnerability makes food a strategic resource, one that powerful states can weaponize through export controls, trade restrictions, and economic coercion. Historically, food has been used as both a tool of diplomacy and a weapon of war. During the Cold War, the US leveraged its grain exports to gain influence over the Soviet Union, while Moscow in turn subsidized food shipments to Allied states. Today, the same dynamics play out in more complex ways. Major agricultural exporters, like the US, Brazil, Russia, and the European Union, hold significant geopolitical leverage because their crops feed the world. When they restrict exports, either due to domestic shortages or political strategy, the consequences ripple across the globe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 exposed how deeply food security is tied to geopolitics. Ukraine, known as the breadbasket of Europe, saw its grain exports blocked by Russian forces, triggering a global wheat shortage. Prices soared, hitting import-dependent nations in the Middle East and Africa hardest. Countries like Egypt, which relies on Ukrainian and Russian wheat for over 70% of its supply, face the risk of bread riots and political instability. In response, the UN brokered the Black Sea Grain Initiative to temporarily unblock exports, a deal that itself became a bargaining chip in wider diplomatic negotiations. Export controls are another key instrument in this geopolitical game. When a major producer like India bans rice exports or Argentina limits beef shipments to curb domestic inflation, the effects are felt worldwide. These decisions are rarely just about economics, they reflect political calculations. Governments prioritize their own populations to prevent unrest, even if it means starving other nations of critical supplies. China, for instance, stockpiles massive grain reserves not just for food security but as a buffer against potential Western sanctions in a conflict over Taiwan. The weaponization of food trade also accelerates shifts in global alliances. Countries vulnerable to supply shocks seek new partners to reduce dependence on traditional exporters. Gulf states, for example, have invested heavily in African farmland to secure long-term food supplies, while China has expanded agricultural deals in Latin America and Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, rising protectionism, such as export bans on fertilizers or staple crops, pushes nations towards self-sufficiency or regional trade blocs, fragmenting the global food market further. Climate change adds another layer of instability. Droughts, floods, and extreme weather disrupt harvests, forcing governments to choose between feeding their own people and honoring international contracts. As these crises multiply, food importing nations may grow desperate, making them more susceptible to political pressure. A country facing famine might align with a powerful patron offering food aid in exchange for military access or diplomatic support. Ultimately, food security is a cornerstone of national power, and export controls are one of its sharpest tools. In an era of climate shocks, war, and economic nationalism, the struggle over who controls the world's food supply will shape alliances, conflicts, and the balance of power in the 21st century. Nations that can guarantee their food supply will retain sovereignty, those that cannot may find themselves at the mercy of more powerful states, with hunger as the ultimate bargaining chip.